Hello everyone, I am Dr. Varun Kunte, founder and director of Arthros TMJ. I welcome you all to this unique presentation, Splints in TMD. TMD is temporomandibular joint disorders, and I'm going to talk about what kind of splints we can use, right? So there are a number of splints that you all use for treating TM joint disorders, but I'm going to talk about which splints are we supposed to use? What is the correct way in treating TMJ disorders? Or let's say, what is the most optimal way in treating TMJ disorders? I'm going to talk about why neuromuscular approach in making splints for TMJ disorders, or rather, why neuromuscular dentistry in the first place. So we are going to see in brief what is neuromuscular dentistry, how is it different from a regular splint or a night guard, and how it can help general dental practitioners to enhance their quality of patient care in terms of management of TMJ disorders. So let's get quickly into it. First of all, let me ask you, what do you mean by neuromuscular? You are right. As what I said, neuro means nerves and muscular refers to muscles. So basically, any dental procedure that takes care of nerves and it also takes care of muscles is basically neuromuscular, right? Any dental procedure that makes sure that after the dental part is fixed, after the dental treatment is done, muscular part is taken care and the nerves are also at the optimum health, that basically is neuromuscular dentistry. It is often said that form is of no use without its function. So what neuromuscular dentistry does is it brings function to the dentistry. So if you want to know what neuromuscular dentistry is and how it can help you, watch this video.
There are many factors that create an attractive face. Eye color and facial traits are genetically determined. However, there are environmental stresses that can change the shape of the face, limiting genetic beauty potential. A pleasing face is both proportional and symmetrical. Formation of the arch and jaw position are together very important factors. They're the foundational scaffolding that supports the overlaying muscles and tissue that create what we identify as beauty. It's common to have distortion occur as a result of mouth breathing. Allergies, enlarged tonsils and adenoids, and deviated septums create problems. Chronic mouth breathing causes the tongue to drop down to the floor of the mouth. The arch formation narrows, and the teeth become crooked and crowded. The upper teeth tilt back, the lower jaw moves back or recedes, compressing the jaw joints. These changes not only cause facial deformities, but also migraines, headaches, neck pain, TMD, and other sleep-breathing disorders. In women especially, symptoms of facial, neck and joint pain, and stuffiness or ringing in the ears result because the muscles are strained, fatigued, and overworked. Over time, these supporting muscles develop painful muscle spasms. As the muscles contract or shorten from spasm, they also change the underlying skeletal structure, leading to an unattractive and/or painful change throughout the body. Forward head posture, like a turtle head, changes to the spine. Uneven hips, legs, and feet can become painful and compromise overall function and health. A narrow arch form can force the tongue back into the throat and block the airway, causing snoring, sleep apnea, and other breathing disorders. This affects both children and adults and has severe health consequences and complications. This includes high blood pressure, stroke, insomnia, heartburn, acid reflux, daytime sleepiness, and fatigue, along with diabetes, ADD, ADHD, and bedwetting. The goal is to return the jaw to its normal, healthy, decompressed position. With proper treatment, muscle spasms relax and disappear, allowing the muscles to return to their natural, ideal length. As a result, the jaw returns to a more pleasing position, both physiologically and aesthetically. The treatment for these problems is to create a temporary appliance that's worn over the bottom teeth, usually for a period of about 3 or more months, allowing the jaw to slide forward. The jaw joints decompress as fatigue muscles relax. If the appliance is not worn, the jaw moves back again and the cycle of pain returns with facial compromise of the receding of the jaw position. The treatment choices vary according to the age, pain patterns, and level of complexity of the patient's needs. Typical treatment for an adult with pain patterns would involve the use of an orthotic. If the teeth are in need of structural support, the bite can be reconstructed in porcelain. The natural, beautiful ceramic protects a tooth like a cast protects a broken bone. For younger patients, or those who are blessed with healthy and naturally beautiful teeth, the treatment would follow a more orthopedic and orthodontic plan. For younger patients, or those with healthy tooth structure, the solution is to gently increase the narrow arch with an expandable appliance that gently applies directional tension to all sides of the arch for about 3 or 4 months. By widening the arch, more space is created to accommodate room needed to straighten the teeth. Additionally, it creates the necessary freedom for the tongue to reposition to a more healthy location that does not block the airway. Bonding material is applied to the molars and the backside of the front teeth, holding this desired new position of the jaw without fear of relapse. Braces can now move the teeth into their ideal position. The bonded material is removed, and the newly created bite will hold the proper aesthetic and proper skeletal position in place. Not only has a wonderful harmonious relationship between the bite and complementary musculature been created, but also more symmetrical facial proportions and better airflow to help correct the breathing disorders as well. This is all accomplished with non-invasive techniques. Externally, the tissues have been gently stretched over the new supporting structures, providing a beautiful facelift effect. Ultimately, the patient's arch form and jaw position have been restored, providing enhanced health and beauty. Invest.
So, from this video, you can guess that it is very simple to go for about neuromuscular dentistry. But the question is, why to do neuromuscular dentistry and why not a normal splint? Many prosthodontists, many general dentists, even a lot of my colleagues make a very nice stabilization splint, or let's say an anterior repositioning splint. My question is, why not these normal splints, and why go for neuromuscular splint, which requires a certain equipment, certain number of equipment such as quadratens, T-scan, EMGs, jaw tracker. Why go through trouble of procuring all these equipments, measuring everything, and then fabricating a splint, whereas in a normal splint, let's say a stabilization splint, you don't require to invest a single rupee. You can just go ahead, learn the science of making it, and you can just go ahead and make the splint for your patient. So let's see what these normal splints are made up of. Most of the normal splints that we use in dentistry, they're usually flat plane. That means either on maxilla or mandible, but the occlusal table is completely flat. Now let me ask you a question. Are your teeth flat? No. Your teeth are made up of cusps, fossas, ridges. So there are some undulations and there are irregularities in the occlusion, right? It's not flat. And nature has created your occlusion that way because it holds a particular meaning. Your teeth are supposed to fit into each other because, as I have already explained in my previous lectures, that your teeth have certain special sensors in them. These sensors are called as mechanoceptors. So when you're chewing food or when your teeth are grinding against each other, these sensors get activated. These sensors, these mechanoceptors, they directly control the level of muscle activity. Okay, so when you make a splint, okay, and when you make it flat, you completely block that proprioception, you completely block that feedback that your occlusion is giving to your muscles, right? So the role of your occlusion is not just to chew food, it is to maintain good health of the muscles as well. Any irregularity in occlusion is going to have its effect on the muscles. any muscular issue will have certain effect on the occlusion. So both are kind of related. So affecting occlusion affects muscles, affecting muscles indirectly affects occlusion. So let's say you have a muscle pain, you have a patient of TMJ disorder, and a patient comes with a myofascial pain. So he has headaches and he has, let's say, a left side facial pain, and you fabricate a nice flat plane splint for him. Okay, so what are you going to do in that? You are going to block the feedback of the occlusion to the muscles. So what is going to happen is muscles are going to take nice rest. They are not going to function at all. The result is you are having pain from muscles which were overactive. And now, because of your splint, you have blocked the feedback to the muscles, thereby muscles are not doing anything. So muscles are absolutely relaxed. Okay, so the fatigue that was built in these muscles goes away. So muscles get some adequate resting time and the pain goes away with it. Okay, of course it is subject to certain conditions. For example, if your muscles are extremely tired, okay, they are very much fatigued because of whatsoever reason. Let's say you have deficiencies. You have vitamin B12, you have vitamin D3, you have number of deficiencies. Okay, and your muscles are dead tired. I mean, whatever you do, your muscles are not going to react because they are extremely tired. So in such a case, even if you give splint, you're not going to have much difference. So a lot of it depends on the accommodative capacity of the patient. So if patient's accommodative capacity is fine, so you give some resting period to the muscles and muscles will resume their function. So basically what flat plane splints do, usually they are used for relieving acute episode of TMD, any acute pain. Okay, so that is relieved by flat plane splint. And then eventually, since the root cause is not treated, the muscle fatigue again starts up building. Okay, again it starts building and eventually it reaches a stage where patient gets symptom again. Now this repeated episode can happen after few days, it can happen after few weeks, it can happen after few months or few years or not at all. That depends on patient's accommodative capacity. Don't you think that patient's assessment should be done far more objectively, far more scientifically, not just based on, how patient feels? Because last time I checked, patient's perception is not equal to reality. I have seen my patients or my family members, okay, those who have fever, they have fever about, let's say, 100 and 101 Fahrenheit, and they're working absolutely fine. There's not a single thing that they complained about. They are like, fine, it's just a little bit off, but not a big deal. I can still do my daily chores. And I have seen some of my family members who have got a temperature of, let's say, 99 degrees Fahrenheit. Not much, okay? But they are making a big deal out of it. They are like, I am having a fever, I'm not going to work, I feel a lot of weakness. So it's rather pretty much subjective. A tough guy who's not keen on showing what he feels probably will bear everything, or his body is tuned in such a way, his body will accommodate the entire problem. But a delicate person who is even a bit off from his regular health will have a lot of symptoms. So symptoms, I would say, is a poor indicator of selecting a treatment for your patients, right? So what I mean to say is that we have to assess objectively. We have to assess patient's conditions objectively. That means if he has muscle problems, we have to measure it with EMG. If he has occlusal problems, measure it with T-scan. If he has TMJ problem, you have JVA, you have CT scans, you have MRI, you have jaw trackers, you have whatnot, right? Another concept that I want to share with you all is there is a concept of centric relation. We all have been taught about centric relation. So the idea is that you bring the mandible in a centric relation where it is supposedly at a superior most and the condyle is seated upright and superior and posterior most or something like that. Well, nowadays the definition of centric is changed. It's like superior and I think anterior. Uh, a lot of my colleagues told me, rather I have checked 7 times, the definition has been upgraded. Is it right? If it is right, please tell me if it is right. Centric relation definition has changed multiple times because the concept is based on biomechanical ways of doing things. So basically, they said that the position of the condyle has to be in the fossa where it can adapt maximum forces. But your body doesn't work on the principles of biomechanics alone. Okay, so it has a lot of guiding factors. It has muscles, it has bones, it has occlusion, it has everything. It has nerves. So centric relation, I don't follow centric relation, but if you do, you can definitely go ahead with it as long as you measure everything. And if you feel that your centric relation is going to do wonders for your patient, you're more than welcome to go about your way of doing things. But let me tell you, the way I do it is I do it using neuromuscular approach. Okay, so we are going to discuss that in detail. Another thing is deprogramming. Now this is a very beautiful word that they have coined for all of us, deprogramming. Okay, so it sounds very nice. Deprogram. I'm going to deprogram the muscles and I'm going to give you an anterior deprogrammer and the patient symptoms are going to go away. Nice. Well, I would say it's not an adequate term. Your muscles do have a memory, yes, but there's no way of measuring that memory. So you can't say you have wiped out all the memory by deprogramming the muscles, and that is why now you're going to reprogram muscles in the centric relation so that they work beautifully, where you're not even bothering to measure any muscle activity. You're not even going to measure how the condyle is sitting in the glenoid fossa, how the TMJ entire complex is working in the new position. So nothing has been checked, but just based on let's say based on biomechanical principle, it has been called that it's going to deprogram. So I don't believe, but if you believe that deprogramming is done, fine, that's your choice. I would rather call it that you give that deprogrammer, anterior deprogrammer, what happens is your muscles don't work. Usually your muscles relax. Okay, so when your muscles relax, the pain goes away. So that basically is called as deprogramming. So I don't think it is complete wiping out of the muscle memory and reprogramming the muscles. It's just a fancy term. That's what I think. We can agree to disagree. You can have your own perspective, and we can always have a debate about this, as long as we respect each other's opinions, right? So, but the fundamental question is, leave all that politics behind, leave whatever I said behind. There are different schools of thought, and everybody is entitled to have his or her opinion, and they can pursue his or her school of thought. Ultimately, patients are at the epicenter of treatment options, right? You have to get your patients better. So a lot of times, my colleagues tell me, doctor, but I gave a splint and my patient is absolutely fine. There is no pain. There's no pain. So the next question is, now why should I treat? Pain is gone. Patient is happy. I am happy. Now what is the treatment? Why should I treat? Pain is gone, right? Pain to chala gaya. तो अभी treatment क्यों करना है? मेरा patient convince नहीं होगा treatment के लिए. That's what my colleagues used to tell me. Well, let me tell you again. If you are going to just talk about symptoms of a disease, okay, and you're not going to look into the disease, actually, root cause of the disease, then symptoms are going to come back every now and then. Okay, for an example, I talked about fever. So you have a high grade fever. We are living in the times of COVID-19, and this Chinese virus is wreaking havoc everywhere in the world. And one of the primary symptoms is high-grade fever, right? It is a viral disease, so it has fever. Now, if you get a fever, okay, and you don't get it tested, you don't go for any blood test, you just keep on taking paracetamol. Okay, your fever may be in control after taking paracetamol, but are you cured? Is your disease treated? No, absolutely not. So, if you're just about treating pain and not going to worry about why pain happened in the first place, then I think you've got it all wrong. And it's time that we have a fresh look at how to treat our patients. So, let me give you one more example. Okay, many patients have this problem. Many patients have blocked coronary arteries, blocked 60% block, 70% block, 80% block, but absolutely no symptoms. Okay, mild pain here and there, but that gets cured with some medication, but otherwise no symptoms whatsoever. And then one fine day, after many years, he or she gets a heart attack. And suddenly, now it's severe pain. It's do or die situation. So, if you come to know, if you have that mild chest pain, but you don't get treated, you just take medication for it. You just get treated by analgesic for it. Okay, and in the end, you come to know that there was a coronary artery blockage, and if you would have gone for a bypass surgery or angioplasty, you could have saved that potential cardiac arrest. And mind you, this can be do or die situation. So what is to be done? Should we wait for the heart attack to happen and then treat because there was no pain earlier and pain happened only after heart attack? It's foolish. It's absolutely foolish. I get this question lot of times from many accomplished doctors. No, but doctor, my patient is absolutely happy with my treatment. I said that is not an indicator of whether you have done right or wrong. Today I listened to Dr. Rajiv Verma, and Dr. Rajiv Verma sir said that 28 years ago he did a root canal and he said there was no gutta percha filling in it, and the patient was absolutely happy. So did I do the right thing? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. So we have to make sure that we have to treat patient whole and soul and not just the symptoms that he is representing. Why? Let's take an example of a glass of water. The water is half filled and somebody is pouring the water on top of it. Okay. Now this glass is your body. Your body has certain physiologic limit. That is the rim of the glass. So the moment the water overflows, that means your body's fighting capacity, your body's accommodative capacity, your body's physiologic limit is crossed. Now you will start having symptoms. Okay. But if you change the glass or if you increase the height of the glass, if you keep a bigger glass, then again the symptoms will disappear till the time the glass is full to its rim and it starts overflowing. So what is the solution here? You have to stop pouring water in that glass. That is the cause. So if you are just going to be bothered about spilled water at the sides, okay, you may treat your patients and your patients may be happy for a while, but eventually your patients are going to come back to you and say, or they may not come back to you and go to some other dentist and say, still it hurts. Or let me tell you one nice thing. This example, now the glass is already, okay, it's full, the water is overflowing. Okay, now patient comes back to you, you again do something and symptoms go away. 1 month later, symptoms again come back. This time patient doesn't come to you. He said, I've already gone to this doctor 2 times. It's not helping me. I'm going to another one. And now the patient will go to another doctor. So you have lost your patient, right? If you would have told him, okay, these are your symptoms. I understand that your symptoms are causing you trouble. Your pain is giving you a lot of trouble. I'm going to treat your pain first, but we have to look for what is the reason of your pain, why you are having pain, and why you are getting all these symptoms. Once your acute phase is over, we have to treat you for your actual disease and you treat that patient and patient is happy with you, he will bless you all his life. He will send minimum 30, 40, 50 patients to your clinic saying that this doctor treated me completely. He did not just give me medication for my pain, but he told me that I have underlying problem and this also needs to be fixed. Otherwise, these symptoms will keep on coming every now and then. That is why many patients have multiple splints. They have splints made by 3, 4, 5 doctors. And if you ask them, why did you get so many splints done? The typical answer is, first I wore the splint, it helped. After a month or after a year, again the pain came back. So my doctor made another splint. Again this time it worked. Then I went after 6 months. Again pain came back. Now third splint. This time it didn't work. So I changed my doctor. This another doctor made another splint. This worked for another few months. So this goes on and on and on. So what is to be done? Can we let it go like this for many years until there comes a time when you will realize now there is something at wrong? This patient is suffering from 5 years and still he has 5 years, 5 splints, but no reduction in pain. Then are you going to treat? Mind you, my friends, human body can take all those insults only to a limit. Mind you, there are certain irreversible changes associated with these problems. Your body has certain repairing capacity. It cannot regenerate everything. Can you regenerate your muscles? No, you cannot. Can you regenerate your nerves? No. There are some things in your body which cannot regenerate. They can only repair, and repair, mind you, it's always a compromised situation. So, chronic inflammation will cause chronic permanent changes in your muscles. Changes like fibrosis. Now, fibrosed muscles, can you get them back to their optimal function? Can you have you seen a patient who requires knee replacement and after his knee is replaced, he walks like he was 20 years old? It's not possible. There is a compromise. So, if you wait for symptoms to occur again, you are allowing the disease process to progress to another level. So the whole point of this lecture is to tell you that don't rely on symptoms, and there is a way in which you can objectively assess all the parameters and give your patient the treatment that he deserves. Okay, so let's say you have made a nice splint, you have followed all the principles that are taught in the book. Most of them, I'm so sorry to say, but most of them are outdated. They were written many years back. They did not stood the test of time, and they need to be updated. As I told you, the definition of centric relation itself has been updated so many times. I don't know why there is so much of confusion. If it was the ultimate position, right? So why it has to be changed 7 or 8 times? I don't know why. So it's time that we introspect and look at the whole concept from a scratch. So let's say you make this splint, okay? Then many of you will tell me, sir, we have to make a splint in CR, we have to guide the mandible in CR, then we have to take the bite record at a particular stage, we have to make the tripod contact, etc, etc, etc. And after that we have to make a full mouth rehabilitation, okay, based on the splint that we have given. Okay, very well, very good. You remember few years back there were doctors who were telling, I am doing great implants just on IOP and OPGs, I don't need CBCT. I would like to ask, where are they? Where are they? My dear friends, the technology is going to overpower your clinical judgment at some point of time. That is why we have investigations in the first place. If you wanted to play God and say that I am going to do this full mouth rehab and I'm not going to bother checking occlusion, I'm not going to bother checking muscles because my patient doesn't have pain, then my friends, you've got it wrong. If anything and everything can be assessed by clinical examination, by clinical assessment, then why do you need investigations? Why do you need OPG? Why do you need CBCT? Why do you need blood investigations? You can very well guess anemia. You can check the lower palpebral conjunctiva. You can check the tip of the nose. You can check tongue. You can check the buccal mucosa, and you can say patient has anemia, start medication. Why do you go for blood investigations? There are certain loopholes in, or there are certain limitations of diagnosticians, of clinicians, and to overpower those limitations, we have a certain confirmatory tests that we call as investigations, right? That is why I'm an oral medicine doctor. We are supposed to be specialized diagnosticians, okay? But whenever we take history and we write a diagnosis without investigations, we write provisional diagnosis. We never write final diagnosis. It's always provisional diagnosis, okay? So if you think that you are going to do a nice full mouth rehab and that's going to work for your patient, could. But you know what? It could be a hit or it could be a miss. Check this. Now this is a very famous story, okay? And there's going to be a movie on it soon. This is the story of Prithviraj Chauhan, a great king of Delhi, great Hindu king of Delhi. And this is Sultan Muhammad Ghori. So the legend goes like this, that Prithviraj Chauhan beat Muhammad Ghori some 16-17 times, but since Ghori surrendered, he let Ghori go. And one last time, the Muhammad Ghori beat Prithviraj Chauhan. He had him imprisoned. He didn't let him go anyways. He had him imprisoned. His eyes were taken out. Okay, he was made blind. He was subjected to a lot of torture. Now, what is the relevance of the story here? Okay, Prithviraj Chauhan wanted to kill Muhammad Ghori because of all this torture. Okay. Now, but how can he kill Muhammad Ghori without eyes? Right? So, the legend says that somebody, Prithviraj Chauhan's associate or friend, somebody, his subject, told him the position of Muhammad Ghori using some shloka. Okay? And Muhammad Ghori, the Prithviraj Chauhan, without looking, we cannot, he was blind, so without his eyesight, he raised the bow and killed Muhammad Ghori. But you know what? That was great King Prithviraj Chauhan. So he was hit because he was trained in all this. Okay. So it was hit or a miss. So tell me honestly, what are the chances of this king killing his opponent without eyes? Very thin. Very, very, very thin. And most of you are not as good as Prithviraj Chauhan. For an example, most of you are not, like including me, we are not as good as our mentors. I know a lot of doctors, a lot of clinicians like Dr. Ajit Shetty sir, he has T-scan by the way, but Dr. Avinash Shah sir, he also has T-scan, but they make beautiful splints. Okay, they may get it right, I don't know, but can you and me get it right? It's difficult. So I would rather rely on reality than my perception. And most of these mentors also have biometric TMD equipments. Okay. So say an example in this image. One guy is saying four sticks and one guy is saying 3 sticks. Who's right? It's all perception versus reality. So I would rather base my diagnosis, my treatment methods based on reality and not perception. What I feel is my opinion. Okay. But when I give a number to it, when I give a number to any parameter, it becomes a fact. I can prove it anywhere. Hence, I want to tell you that absence of pain does not necessarily mean absence of disease. Okay? So, if you want to know what is the difference between a normal splint and a neuromuscular orthotic, by the way, orthotic means splint, nothing different, but the orthotic is more appropriate term. What is the difference? Then the difference is any and everything about neuromuscular orthotic is measured. It is made at a particular neuromuscular position. It is made and it is made as per the muscle function. The occlusal forces on the orthotic is measured with T-scan. The TM joint condition is measured with JVA or MRI. The jaw position is measured with jaw tracker. So everything is measured, and you may ask, what is the need for it? Well, it is. How do you know that you have made a splint and it has worked for the patient? You don't know unless you measure. Okay, so how do you know when you place an implant just because you cannot see that it is perforated from outside? Okay, that's not true. I mean, you have to go for CBCT or some other investigation, and you have to make sure that the implant that you have placed is accurately placed. And if it is not, you can take it out and place it again. Similarly, we cannot be blind in our treatments, in our splints for TMD. We have to go for measured way. So this measured way is nothing but neuromuscular way, right? So how do you measure? As I told you, there are 4-5 equipments with which you measure. One is T-scan, where you measure the forces on that neuromuscular orthotic. We're using T-scan. EMG is used to measure muscle function. JVA is used to measure joint function, TMJ function. JT is jaw tracker. JT3D is used to measure the jaw position or jaw movements. Quadratens is used to relax all the muscles so that this optimal jaw position or physiologic rest position of mandible is reached. Okay. Well, there are other machines as well. The replacement of quadratens, this J5 myomonitor by MyoResearch. Instead of JT, there is K7. But then these are relatively similar. I prefer BioResearch. I use BioResearch products. So I'm mentioning BioResearch. So let's get into details, how it is made. Now, this is a fabulous neuromuscular dentist, Dr. Patrick Giraud, and he's from Moncton, Canada, if I'm right, Patrick. And by the way, please check out his work. It's amazing. Follow him on Facebook, and he keeps on posting all these amazing cases, and work is phenomenal. I recommend that you follow this guy on all the social media platforms. So in the image, you can see that there is a splint that this guy has made, and what he has done is he has applied principles of DTR on this splint. Okay, so he has used T-scan and EMG on the patient when the splint is in place, and you can see on the right hand side of the screen the red circle says that the dissolution time is slightly more than optimal. Okay, it's slightly more than optimal. It's 0.5, so it has to be less than 0.4. Okay, and on the left hand side of the screen you can see the corrected dissolution time, the green circle that represents the accurate dissolution time is 0.13. So it's again back in its normal range. So you can balance the forces on the splint using T-scan. So T-scan are your eyes in terms of occlusal discrepancies. Now the second is EMG. Okay, so the blue circle here is going to tell us that the EMG activity, okay, you can see some numbers 1.6, 1.28, 1.25. So these are basically muscle activities. Okay, and on the right hand side of the screen you can see there are something written as TAR, TAL. So these are all the muscles. Okay, so TAR is right temporalis, TAL is left temporalis, MMR is right masseter, MML is left masseter. DAR is right digastric, DAL is left digastric. Okay. Now, Of course, there's two more muscles which are not mentioned here, is right SCM and left SCM, sternocleidomastoid. Okay, they are not mentioned in this slide. Now, optimal activity at rest of all the facial muscles or neck muscles is supposedly less than 1.5 microvolts. 1.5 microvolts. So anything that is more than 1.5 microvolts, okay, will be red. So if it is 1.5 to 2 microvolts, then it is borderline hyperactivity. So that means it will be shown in yellow. As you can see, TAR, that is right temporalis, is activity is 1.6. That means it is slightly above normal, so it is yellow. Okay, and if the activity surpasses 2 microvolts, then it will be displayed in red. That means these muscles are hyperactive, they are fatigued, they are hyperactive. Okay, so the next slide you can see all these hyperactive muscles. Again, the blue circle on the left hand side of the screen, you can see that upper four muscles, right temporalis, left temporalis, right masseter, left masseter. Now the right temporalis activity is 1.6, so it is displayed in yellow. The left temporalis, right masseter, left masseter, all activity is more than 2, so all are displayed in red. That means they are hyperactive. So when you are making a splint, if you relax all these muscles and make a splint, then your splint is likely to keep these muscles in a relaxed condition. So your patients will not have pain after wearing the splint. Okay. Now, in a normal subject, when you check the activity of muscles during clenching, when you bite, right? You chew your food. So during chewing, you clench your teeth. So the normal activity is considered somewhere around 100 to 300 microvolts. Another study says 250 to 280 microvolts is optimal, but let's give it a broad range. What's more important than absolute values is the relative difference between muscle activity. Now, what is this relative difference? Basically, there should be good symmetry in muscle activity. That means right side temporalis and left side temporalis activity should be similar. Right side masseter and left side masseter activity should be similar. That means there should be almost 80% or 75% relativity in masseter and both, I mean right side and left side muscles. Okay, there has to be good synergy. Now what is synergy? Synergy means on the same side. Synergy means that right side temporalis and right side masseter should have similar values. Okay, so all muscles should have similar values, but right side masseter, right side temporalis and right side masseter, left side temporalis and left side masseter should have similar values. Okay, so if the values are not similar, there is a certain amount of imbalance that you are going to see. Okay, and that imbalance is later on going to cause trouble. Take this example. On the upper image, which is on the right hand side of the screen, there are two arrows. Okay, the first arrow is right temporalis and the second arrow is right masseter. Now look at both muscles here. The right side temporalis and right side masseter, there is a huge difference in the muscle activity. So what is happening is there is very bad symmetry here, but there is very bad synergy here. But if you check the activity of right temporalis with that of left temporalis, it's almost similar. Okay, so there is good symmetry but bad synergy here. You want good symmetry, good synergy. Okay, take the example in the lower part of the screen on the left side. Again, there are two arrows. These two arrows are representing the activity of digastric. Now, when you are clenching or when you're closing, the elevator muscles work. Okay, that means the masseter, temporalis, it has to be when you're clenching, basically, so the masseters have to work, temporalis has to work, but digastric has to rest. Okay, but if your mandible is retruded, okay, I have already explained in my previous lectures that your mandible tends to go back because of occlusal interferences. Your jaw repositions itself in a more posterior position that causes compression of the TMJ. Okay, so if that retrusion is happening, then you're going to have something like this, where you have good activity of temporalis, but the masseter inhibition is seen here. Both masseters are not working very well. Also, the digastrics are responsible for taking the mandible back along with posterior fibers of temporalis, but digastric also takes your mandible backwards. So if it is too much retruded, and if you want to further take the patient into centric relation and retrude it even further, then you will have unnecessary extra muscle activity. So at times when you restore patient in centric relation, it gets more painful for the patients. So I would strongly recommend, irrespective of any school of thought you use, if you are doing centric relation and if you find that there is a muscle discrepancy, don't restore in centric relation, wait for it. Restore in neuromuscular position, see if the muscles are doing well. So based on how muscles are behaving, how occlusion is there, how joint function is happening, whether you are restoring at physiologic rest position of mandible, take all these parameters, then not just centric relation, not just because somebody said that you have to take it back and then up. It doesn't work like that. You have to make sure that all these muscles are also working well. Another example is, we are seeing that on the top side of the screen, you can see there is poor symmetry. Okay, the right side temporalis and left side temporalis, they're not working well. Left side is working more than the right side. So right side muscles are typically weak there. The lower image, now that's an interesting one. The lower image, you can see two arrows. Okay, you can see that there are masseters which are not working. Okay, as I told you, if your jaw is retruded, or you are a class 2 patient, or you're putting in centric, at times there is masseter inhibition because of reduced contact. Okay, so there's a masseter inhibition because of the jaw position as well. So that is evident here in the clench. But when you ask the same patient to clench on cotton rolls, okay, suddenly there is surge in the muscle activity, because when you place the cotton rolls on the back teeth and patient tries to bite, naturally his jaw comes slightly forward. There is decompression of the joint, jaw comes slightly forward, and more teeth come in contact, and that is why the muscles get activated. Now you tell me, what kind of muscle activity do you desire? Do you desire a clench in MIP where masseters are not working well, or you desire a clench on cotton rolls where all muscles are working well, good symmetry, good synergy, good timing of muscle firing? What do you want? You want optimal muscle functions. So if in a natural patient, in a natural dentition, if something like this is happening and patient is painful, then instead of doing just normal splint, you can get him slightly downwards and forwards in a neuromuscular position and make an orthotic there. You will find that muscles are working much better way. Okay, another interesting slide is okay, let's talk about the first upper image. So we have asked patient to bite hard, clench, and then we have taken the reading. So that is centric occlusion. Okay, maximum intercuspal position or intercuspal position, ICP. So when the patient is biting hard in centric occlusion, the muscles are not hyperactive, muscles are not working at all. Okay, so we are not getting any muscle activity. We should get certain amount of muscle activity. Remember, too much of activity is bad, too less of activity is also bad. Hence there is an optimal range that it has to be somewhere between 100 to 300 microvolts. So we can see that very less muscle activity is there, but when you make an orthotic and when you make it in a neuromuscular position, you can see immediately the muscle activity is improved. So what kind of muscle activity do you desire? How your splint, how you want your splint to be? You want it to be like in CO, or you want it to be an EMG reading like you have in an orthotic? Naturally, all of you will say, I want a splint so that my muscles are functioning in a better way. They are getting adequate rest, they are getting adequate activity, and they are working very well. That's what we want, isn't it? Right? Now the next image. Now this, why I said that this slide is interesting, because many of us use anterior deprogrammers. Okay, there's something that you insert on the front teeth, like an L-shaped thing or a Lucia jig or whatever, and then we say that the muscles get deprogrammed. Well, my friends, not necessarily. Check this EMG image. Now on the left hand side of that image, on the right hand side, you can see clench in ICP, clench in intercuspal position, where you see right temporalis, left temporalis, right masseter and left masseter have certain amount of activity. Now suppose this patient has muscle pain. Okay, suppose this patient has muscle pain and you give deprogrammer, you give anterior deprogrammer. So this patient has headache and this patient has facial pain. When you give a deprogrammer, what you can see is only temporalis is inhibited, only temporalis is relaxed. Right temporalis there is no activity, left temporalis there is no activity. However, right masseter and left masseter activity, although reduced, it is significantly there. So this patient will have no headache or very less headache after you give an anterior deprogrammer, but facial pain, facial tightness will be there. It will be reduced only by 20-30%. So by using EMG, you can determine what kind of treatment will be successful for this patient. It is not one solution fit all situation. You have to custom made treatment plan based on each patient's requirement and give it to him. So for an example, you have TMD patients, you have 100 TMD patients in 1 year, and all of them, if you are giving anterior deprogrammers, it will not work. So with EMG, you can determine which case deprogrammers will work, which case full coverage splints will work, which case you have to go for neuromuscular orthotic. If you take my opinion, it's always better to go guided rather than going blind. So all these splints, they are not accurate because they don't measure. If they measure, we have no problem accepting it. But a neuromuscular orthotic or a physiology based treatments are all measured, right? So don't base your treatment plan just on symptoms. Symptoms can very well fool you, and you don't want to be on the losing side. You want to treat your patients in the best way. You want to add this dimension to your practice. You want to learn this science. You want to gain this skill in order to do great things in your practice. In my lectures, I always say, how many of you want to become a dentist treating headaches, migraines? You can do it. You're meant to treat migraines, you're meant to treat headaches, and it's very simple. And Arthros, me, my colleagues, we are here to teach you how to do it. We are here to do our job. We are going to teach you how you can do all these things in your practice without anybody's help. You don't have to be a super specialist, you don't have to be a postgraduate, you just need a common BDS or MDS degree. Simple. Any BDS can do it, any MDS can do it, any super specialized person can do it. It's very simple because your treatment plan is based on all these investigations which make your job very simple. The third investigation, as I told you, is joint vibration analysis. I've already explained this. So this is a case which we had treated with DTR earlier, occlusal equilibrium kind of a thing. So we can see that the blue circle is telling me that there are some vibrations which are undesired. There are higher vibrations there. More than 20 is not good. So the left side TMJ has around 80 vibrations. Total integral is 80. So now after treatment, the vibrations are reduced to 15.9, that is 16. So it's less than 20. So again, it's optimal. So I am telling you that after you give a splint or after you do a DTR, if you find that the TM joint function is improving, bingo, you are on a right track. Okay, of course, case selection is important. Not every TMJ click will be reduced, but that is where the equipments come in the picture. They will help you which treatment plan, which case. So they will help you in deciding treatment plan for every case. Again, we are back with our friend here, Dr. Patrick, and Dr. Patrick's work is so phenomenal. And why I'm showing you his slides are, check this T-scan image on the right hand side of the screen. You can see the distribution is 68% to the right and 32% to the left. And after the balancing is done, it's almost 50-50. Okay. Notice the change in the posture. The optimal swaying area for any patient, is around 2 centimeter square. It has to be less than 2 centimeter square. Only then you have optimal postural stabilization. So before adjustment, this patient had 6.79, that is 6.8 centimeter square. Look at the red circle, how big it is, and so far from the center. And the after treatment, the posture is stable. It is 1.9, that means 2 centimeter square. Now look at the size of the center. So that much less sway is happening. So less amount of work on the body, good postural stabilization. So by correcting all these things, using your neuromuscular orthotics, using DTR, you can correct patients' posture to an extent. It will have a positive impact on patients' posture. Great. A lot of cases you treat with neuromuscular orthotic, you will find that the neck and back pain is gone or it is reduced. Amazing, right? Amazing. A dentist treating neck pain. How many of you would like to just focus your practice on neck pain? Just do your thing and say, I'm going to work with a chiropractor and I'm going to focus only on treating the patients which have craniofacial pain and neck pain as well. I'll focus mainly on the neck pain. Amazing. See, there are so many dentists passing out every year. How many of us are going to get jobs? How many of us are going to invest in costly equipments for our practice? How many of us are going to go in full general practice? How many general practitioners can a town sustain? So if you focus your skills, if you gain skills, if you focus your attention on a small area, and work only in that area, you will have gained a super specialty status. Name and fame will follow you. Naturally, where name and fame follows, the money will follow you. You will do well. You will work for less time. You will enjoy your life. You will get to spend time with your family. Spend time with kids. You can maybe have a couple of extra beers with your friends, and you can live relatively stress-free. So all I'm trying to tell you, by incorporating all these nice equipments and treatment methods, you will add a great value to your life. You will add a great value. So another question that I get asked is, doctor, how much do we raise VD? What should be the thickness of the splint? So basically, how much raise in the VD? So let's quickly get into the detailed approach on how to make that orthotic. Okay. So in this lecture, I'm going to tell you in brief that how we make that orthotic. And when you come to our course, we'll of course show you how orthotic is made. Now, in phase 1, there are 2 phases. Okay, let's talk about phase 1. So in phase 1, you actually make that orthotic. Now, how do you make that orthotic? Okay, how do you make that splint? Well, the first step is ultra low frequency TENS. Now, why do you want to make an orthotic in a TMD case? Because the patient is suffering from pain. So pain is naturally coming from nerves and muscles. So you need something which will first calm down your nerves and muscles, and then you can make a splint there so that it stays as what it is, right? So ultra low frequency TENS, what it is going to do is, it is going to relax all your muscles and nerves which are hyperactive or which are not working well or which are tired. It's going to take out that fatigue. So what is the difference between ultra low frequency TENS and a normal TENS that physiotherapy guys use? There's a hell lot of difference. Ultra low frequency TENS, there are only 2 machines in the world which are approved by FDA for it. One is J5 MyoMonitor by Myotronics, and the other is what I'm using, Quadra TENS by BioResearch. So these 2 ULF TENS are approved by FDA. Now, why are they so special? Usually, all the TENS is used directly on the muscles, right, to relax that muscle, big muscles. Well, on face or neck, we do it differently. We apply it in an area on a sigmoid notch where you have a branch of mandibular nerve and facial nerve, okay, passing through that sigmoid notch. So when you apply that TENS electrode there and you bring that ultra low frequency stimulation of nerves, these nerves get certain stimulus, and that stimulus is carried to all muscles. supplied by these nerves. So what are the muscles supplied by all these nerves? Almost every muscle is supplied by trigeminal nerve and the a branch of facial nerve, right? So by and large, almost all muscles of face are relaxed. Now you apply another area on another tense electrode at area, something called as Prabhu's point, where you target that spinal accessory nerve. Of course, we'll teach you that in our detailed course. But you apply this on the neck and on the face. So you are basically trying to stimulate nerves and indirectly trying to stimulate all the muscles. So once you once you do that for around 45 minutes or 1 hour, you would have relaxed your muscles. Now, why I said you would have? Why not? You already have relaxed your muscles, like we get in our books. Guide the mandible in centric and then restore it there. There's no cross verification. Okay, so here we have a different approach. We verify, we cross verify. So after giving that ultra low frequency TENS, we have to make sure that muscles have calmed down, don't we? So the EMGs are again used to check whether muscles are relaxed or not. Okay, so first ultra low frequency TENS. Okay, before that you check with EMG. Of course you would have checked prior if you follow our protocols. So you'll come to know that there is muscle hyperactivity, etc., etc. There is this problem, there is that problem. Based on that you decide your treatment plan. So in treatment plan you decide you want to make an orthotic. Now there are hyperactive muscle, you give TENS. After again 45 minutes of TENS, you measure with EMGs, you find that muscles are relaxed. Okay, then you take a jaw tracker, you track the movements of the mandible, you mark that physiologic rest position of the mandible that jaw tracker determines. At that particular position, you record that bite. Okay, you make a jaw relation at that particular position. It has to be guided using EMGs, TENS and jaw tracker. Okay, so suppose you don't have jaw tracker, like me, I don't have jaw tracker. Okay, so what is to be done? You can do it with TENS and EMGs, JVA, right? You can use all these equipments. Now they say if you just use TENS and EMG, you are going to be right around 70% of times. Fine, you do it 2 or 3 times over. You also cross check with JVA. So you take utmost care that all parameters you have checked, everything is calm, and that position you record the bite. Okay, so at that particular position you make that orthotic. All right, so first step TENS, second step EMG, third step jaw tracker. You record that bite. You can choose to do a Facebook recording, and then, but not in centric, of course, when you're guiding that mandible, not in centric. At a neuromuscular position, if you can get it, you can mount it. That's your choice. And then make an orthotic there. The lab will make you an orthotic at that particular place. So this is the Quadra TENS that I use. So the top image is showing you hyperactive muscles. So hyperactive, there are temporalis which are hyperactive. Right temporalis is 3.79, left is 2.34. So now when we give the 45 minutes ULF TENS, we will on the bottom side we are seeing an image where all muscles have calmed down. Okay, so that means you have ruled out the hyperactive muscles. Now muscles are calm and you can easily proceed. When the muscles are calm, they guide the mandible in a particular trajectory. So that is, we call it myotrajectory. Okay, so that is very important. So let's not get into technicalities, but let me just show you a brief overview of how things are done. Now you have got that position on jaw tracker. You have confirmed with EMGs. By TENS, you have relaxed the muscles and you have made sure everything is fine. By the way, you also have to take JVA to make sure that the new position is adequate for TM joints. And finally, you make an orthotic. So you make that orthotic on mandible. Okay, now why mandible? Which is the movable component of your jaw? Maxilla, does it move? No, only mandible moves. So in order to stabilize maxillomandibular relationship, it's always better to make an orthotic on mandible. Now, orthotic can be of different types. It can be removable, it can be fixed, it can be clear hard acrylic, it can be resin or acrylic, it can be 3D printed, it can be CAD CAM milled. But the most important factor, it has to be anatomic. The first slide I showed you the flat plane splints. Your body, I mean, your teeth are not flat. Then why should an orthotic be flat? By giving an orthotic, you're trying to replicate ideal dentition that patient has lost. That ideal dentition cannot be flat. It can be flat for a time being. If you have acute symptoms, give a flat plane splint, that will maybe reduce the patient's symptoms. Acute phase will be over. But if you're giving an orthotic, orthotic is carefully engineered appliance. So if you're giving something which is so carefully designed and tried and tested with all these equipments, it has to be orthotic. Why? It has to be anatomic. Why? Because your muscles need to be active during certain period of time and they need to rest during certain period of time. You cannot just block all stimulus to teeth, right? To muscles. Your muscles have to be active. Things that you don't use get atrophied. So you don't want your muscles to get atrophied. You don't want your muscles to get fibrosed, chronically fatigued, chronically inflamed. So in order to make them work, we have to strike a balance. Balance is the key here. Everywhere the balance has to be maintained. So in the neuromuscular orthotic maintains that balance between activity and relaxation of the muscles. So this is how that orthotic looks. It can be a resin orthotic, like you can see, it's made of resins. Okay, so it matches the shade of the teeth. Or it can be an acrylic orthotic, like in an image. Or it can be a CAD CAM milled. It can be a removable, or it can be a fixed orthotic. It can be locked in. Let's not go into that per se, but it locked in means if the patient has lost his kind of or there's dyskinesia, then you cannot just give an orthotic and open movement everywhere, because patients' muscles are not used to that kind of controlled activity. So in order to give a lot of rest, you restrict activity of mandible in just open and close, no sideways movement. So there are these acrylic locks which come up. So you can only open your jaw like this and close. You cannot, chew like that. Okay, so of course it's only for time being, a month or two maybe, and then you remove that locks, and so that patient's muscle health is already restored by then. You make sure with EMGs, of course, and then after removing the locks, you can treat it as a normal orthotic. Okay, at times you will require multiple orthotics. Okay, these orthotics are made up of say clear acrylic, so they can wear and tear in few months, so you can replace them. Ultimately, you can wear this orthotic for 6 to 8 months, perhaps maximum, let's say 10 months. But they're not long-term treatments, right? They're just to make sure that if you change the position of the mandible and if you relax all the muscles and everything, the patient's symptoms are gone, and you can objectively assess that muscle function has improved, occlusal discrepancy is improved, the TM joint situation is improving. So now you want to make it permanent. So that's when you go to phase 2. Okay, but before going to that, your occlusion is connected to muscles, it is connected to joints, it is connected to all craniofacial bones, it is connected to the rest of the body. Okay, so lot of other factors also have influence on your occlusion. Also occlusion has influence on all these other factors. For example, sleep apnea. So if your patient is suffering from sleep apnea, there will be a lot of clenching and grinding. If your patient is suffering from a lot of stress, then also there will be a lot of clenching and grinding. So you need to take care of all these issues. So when I'm telling you that you can make neuromuscular orthotic, use this, use EMG, use T-scan, and you don't do basic clinical examination, no, that is not the point here. You of course do the basic clinical examination, you go for psychometric evaluations, you make sure that you try out every method to reduce stress. So all I'm saying is that there are a lot of factors here. Correcting just one factor won't be enough. You have to correct almost all factors as much as possible, as much as humanly possible within the limitations of medical practice. So all other postural issues, I told you Patrick's work in posture and occlusion. So there are chiropractors which work on the neck and back, and then there's change in the way your teeth fit with each other. Amazing, right? I mean, you change the neck alignment and the way your maxilla and mandible align with each other changes. That in turn causes a lot of neuronal feedback. Dr. Nick Yanios is doing a great work in autonomic nervous system or sympathetic nervous system impact in dentistry. Amazing work, amazing. And we are just talking about what RCs, crowns, root canal. I mean the full mouth rehabs and implants. But you know what? We are doing a lot of things. We are changing sympathetic tones. We are changing posture. We are treating headaches, migraines, and all of us are normal general doctors. Now all of us are dentists. We're not somebody who's a very super specialized and something like that. It's anybody can do it. If we can do it, anybody can do it. So after you take care of all these issues, and once everything is sorted, now you go for phase 2. Okay, so phase 2 you go for either ortho, okay, or you go for prostho, or you go for surgery, or whatever. I mean, whatever is required by the patient. As you saw in that video, if you have a young patient where you think that after moving his teeth orthodontically or by slight expansion of the jaw, you can accommodate that tongue and everything. So if you can do that, use orthodontics. If you cannot use orthodontics, if there's already wear and tear, then you can use prosthodontics. If you want to use orthodontics to slightly expand a bit, and if you want to align the teeth well before you go in for prosthodontic correction, you can do that. So it really depends on case to case, but the ultimate aim is to wean off the orthotic and give permanent solution, right? So let's get into details. How much to raise VD, how you decide. So there are again number of schools of thought. There are many people who suggest how much VD has to be raised. I'm going to tell you my way of doing things, or how I learned at ICCMO. So ICCMO is also a great organization for neuromuscular doctors. In India, we have many members, many neuromuscular doctors, many seniors, many young dynamic fellows as well. And I urge you, those who are interested in learning, please join ICMO India. It's amazing platform to learn. We all share our knowledge with each other. It's a great platform to learn. So you can join ICMO India. Those of you who want to join ICMO India, just get in touch with me and I'll connect you with the right guys. So our approach is we use golden proportion. At ICMO India, we use golden proportion. I believe it's a right bite protocol. So this golden proportion was given by Dr. Shimbasi. Everybody I think knows it. It's the value is 1.618. That's the golden proportion. So basically what they found is the ideal vertical dimension. Okay, the ideal vertical dimension, they call it golden vertical dimension. Golden proportion, golden vertical dimension. So this ideal or golden vertical dimension is 2.08 into the width of upper central incisor. 2.08 into the width of upper central incisor. Okay, so now how do you decide how much to raise? Okay, let's take my example. Now my vertical dimension, that means CEJ of 1.1 to CEJ of 4.1, CEJ of upper central incisor to CEJ of lower central incisor. My vertical dimension VD is 15 millimeters. Okay, but the width of my upper central incisor is 9 millimeters. Okay, close to 9 millimeters. So how much should be my golden vertical? It has to be somewhere around 18 millimeters. 9 into 2.08 is somewhere around 18 millimeters, right? So GV is 18, golden vertical is 18, and my actual vertical dimension is 15. So if I am suffering from TMD, which actually I am, so if I am suffering from TMD and if I am making an orthotic for myself, the height of that orthotic has to be somewhere around 3 millimeters. The thickness, the height has to be somewhere around 3 millimeters. The raise in the VD has to be somewhere around 3 millimeters. So do I accept 3 millimeters raise and say that's how it should be? It's a thumb rule. So no, my friends, this is a guideline. This is not a thumb rule. So how do you know if you raise 3 millimeters, then my all muscles and everything will be normal? If you raise 3 millimeters, you check with T-scan, you make those small occlusal corrections, you measure with EMG, you measure with JVA, measure with jaw tracker, and make sure that 3 millimeter raise or whatever that I'm doing is adequate for all muscle, joint, teeth, jaw parameters. If it is adequate, you use that vertical dimension. If it is not adequate, find out why it is not adequate, why it is not happening. Raise it by another millimeter, reduce it by another millimeter, see what is happening. Okay, this all you can check. This all you can check before even you make that orthotic. Okay, once you come to our detailed courses, we'll show you how it is exactly done on a digital platform. We have some limitations where we can't show it on a patient. So once you see it on a patient, actually how it is done, then you will understand that how neuromuscular dentistry is done, how DTR is done, and how simple it is, how simple that everybody can do it. So this is not a thumb rule, this is a guideline. So it's very important to measure all parameters in spite of following this protocol. There are many other protocols. There are Shimbasi numbers, this LVI protocol, they use that number 19, and whatever is not adequate, what is the difference between that value, they just add it up and make their sprint. So let's not go into that. It's really not very important. What's important is you can find how much to raise using golden vertical, and then you can actually raise that bite using golden vertical, and you can see what is the difference in muscles, what is the difference in joint position, what is the difference in jaw position. So if it is all working well, great. So you make that neuromuscular orthotic at that particular position, wear it for few months, and then get yourself corrected with all extraneous factors, sleep apnea, stress management, postural issues, whatever is the issue, whatever is going to affect your craniofacial region. So almost everything is going to affect your craniofacial region. So you get them in line, and then once everything is stable, then you go for final correction. That is phase 2, where you go for orthodontic correction, where you go for prosthodontic correction, where you go for combination, or you make of surgical corrections, whatever it is. And once you have done all these corrections, you have to fine tune it. You have to make sure that the new occlusion that you have built, it is again adequate using all these equipments. So don't say that I have used T-scan when I was making a neuromuscular orthotic, I have used EMG, and now at this particular golden vertical, my all muscles are relaxed. At this particular jaw position, all my muscles are relaxed. Now I don't need to check in finished occlusion. No, we are taking guesswork completely out of picture. Okay, so once you make that orthodontic correction or prosthodontic correction, make sure that you follow all these biometric protocols as much as you have, as much as possible. I understand it's not possible to get everything in one go, but I'm telling you, whatever you can do, whatever best you can do, you have to give your best. And it's really not that difficult. There is a great return of investment in these equipments. I am personally using it for a few years now, and we have got a good ROI. And it's not really about getting the ROI, it's actually about doing the right thing, doing the dentistry of tomorrow, doing the dentistry of future. So as I said, phase 2, you can go for all this and you can get the patient better. So this is the company that provides all the equipments. We have TechScan and BioResearch, and Villa India is the sole distributor. Arthros happens to be the technical partner of Villa India. So if they sell you all these materials, and if you require training, which of course they provide with this, so this training is done with Arthros, especially in Mumbai, Maharashtra, Gujarat, Goa region. This training will be done with Arthros. So we will be training you in these equipments, how the equipments are to be used, how treatments are to be rendered, how to get ROI, how to plan your strategy. So it's all everything we will teach you. So right, so this bald gentleman in the frame is Dr. Rajesh Ravindranathan. So he's the president of ICMO. The person on the right hand side of the screen is Dr. Tatu Joy, the vice president. My senior, my colleague, our guru in DTR is Dr. Vikas Agarwal in the center, and then that's me. So we all are members of ICMO, and those of you who want to learn the ICMO, we are an open organization. Your approach, your way of doing things is most welcome. We can share a lot of knowledge with each other, and it's an open platform for any and everybody with an open mind, of course. We can't have arrogant people on board saying that this doesn't work, this doesn't work. We have an open platform. We respect your opinions regardless of what they are, but then you also have to respect our opinions. So we welcome all of you to join ICMO India, and I believe that together with organizations like my own, Arthros, organizations like ICMO, DTR, I think we can change the dentistry of today, and we can become the dentists of tomorrow. So thank you so much, guys, for listening to me. And should you wish to contact me, I have given you my contact details in this. You can also check out our social media handles on @ArthrosTMJ, or you can visit our website on www.arthrostmjindia.com, or you can contact me personally and I shall answer all your questions. Okay, so thank you so much. I hope that you have got a brief idea about what neuromuscular dentistry is, why splints have to be the neuromuscular way, or rather, let's say not a neuromuscular, but basically a measured way. Any treatment that you do has to be a measured treatment. So thank you so much. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel, Arthros TMJ, and follow us on all social media platforms. Thank you.